is William Kumwembe, welcoming you to this week's edition of the program, the Cauldron. This is the program where we weekly gather top editors from various newsrooms in the country to discuss topical issues that are happening in the country, issues that are happening on the international arena, as well as issues that are happening but do have a bearing in as far as how we journalists are conducting our day-to-day operations. Of course, I'm standing in for one Jawezi Banda. Let me first and foremost introduce to you our guests this moment. Mbawo Chavula. Mbawo is news editor at the Blantyre Synod Radio. Mbawo, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
Very long time.
I was saying, wow, I miss an interaction with Mbawo of trends happening in the country, trends on the international scenes, precisely.
And also to tease me a bit.
No. I wanted to say precisely the U.S. politics. How is the landscape, the U.S. politics?
It's going
before
the
we
way
get to the issue. Pulling out of...
You can see that you lost gold.
Let's get to first business first. What was at public institutions? The Public Accounts Committee of Parliament has this week been facing controlling officers from various public institutions tracking financial performance therein. On Tuesday, the committee faced the Anti-Corruption Bureau, which lamented effects of low funding. Before, the committee also faced the Reserve Bank of Malawi governor and his team and queried them on several things, including questions over gold bank capabilities, EDF operating without license, and concerns over rising non-performing loans. It's been a busy week this week, Bawo. We've seen a number of things happening, but our focus would not be on the crew of young people rushing after whatever. Our focus would be on the public accounts meeting various entities and institutions. First things first, what do you make of the PAC's move to face controlling officers, especially over their performance and financial management?
Actually, when you look back at some of the committees we've had in the past, this one seems to be very vibrant. And they really want to get to the bottom of what is happening, which is a very commendable move. And what they are doing, it is what was supposed to be happening for a long time, actually. They have started doing it, and the people are facing questions, and we're getting the answers now. And if there are no answers, definitely there will be solutions.
Timely, isn't it?
It is very timely.
We are talking about the committee representing Parliament, and the move portrays the August House intent to provide checks and balances, if I'm to use that word, on public institutions and other public entities. What do we make of such role and mandate of the committee?
They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and they're doing a good job according to what I'm saying. Because they're in the news, they're asking the tough questions, they are unveiling things which have been hidden in the past. Like, for example, the bank has been operating, doing some shortcuts.
Which we'll examine shortly.
So all those things have come out. And it is because this committee is vibrant and very eager to understand what is going on.
Before we get to the matters arising, one of which is the one that you have just made mention, that the bank subsidiary has been operating for 9 years without a license. That would have to tackle a little later in the program. But let's examine Parliament of Malawi. How do you assess its effectiveness and efficiency?
This particular parliament is faced the challenge of COVID. Despite that, they're still doing a good job. We're seeing them moving. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're conducting the interviews they're supposed to conduct. The oversight role they're playing, we have seen so many CEOs that have been grilled in front of them. So despite the odds, I think they're really trying. Yes.
Its overall mandate, let's not maybe only zero in on the committee, but overall mandate of the August House, lawmakers they are. How do you assess? It's been slightly over a year now, since 2 years about, since the new MPs were voted into power. How do you assess their role and mandates?
They're doing a good job. As I said, they're facing the challenge of COVID, which we all are anyway. Despite that, they're still forging ahead. So they've managed to surmount that challenge. They had problems deciding whether to go virtual or to be half-half. I think they're hybrid now. They're trying. Another thing that has also hit them hard is the number of MPs who have died.
I've noticed
parliament. It's been hectic. So despite all that, they're still going ahead. I would give them maybe 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Wow, that's distinction.
Yeah, it is.
Overall, do parliamentarians, not only focusing on this kind of parliament, but overall, do parliamentarians really have a clear scope or understanding of the key duties? Because we believe and we understand they are lawmakers. Comparatively, do they have a clear understanding?
The problem comes in when they now become partisan. And we notice that mostly as we get closer to elections. But if they're working independently, as they're supposed to, they do quite a good job, and sometimes they can retract. You remember the issue of the Director General of ACB. They voted her out, and then when the public came in, they did the right thing. So I believe that they're trying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, getting to the issues that have brought us here today. On Tuesday, the PAC, that is the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, faced the Anti-Corruption Bureau, where the Bureau said it was failing to retain the desirable top brains. That's the word that they used. It was failing to retain the desirable top brains that would have strengthened the corruption fight in the country because of low salaries. Valid concern?
To a certain extent, yes, but not 100%. Because everyone, everywhere, regardless of how much they get, if they've gotten a chance to earn even more, they'll move. It's not just happening with the ACB. Mm-hmm. It's happening in all spheres of the society. So that one, even if they raise their salaries to 100%, if somebody decides to move, they're going to move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Deputy Director of the ACB, Elia Bodoli, told the committee that salaries at the ACB are low, such that most of the high-caliber employees dump the institution wherever they get a job offer elsewhere that offers them better conditions. It's still a tricky situation for the Anti-Corruption Bureau. I
think we'd have parameters to comment if we actually knew how much low it means to them. Low to somebody could mean 1 million. To somebody it could mean 100,000. So you really don't know. And they did not mention the figures. So we really have no basis to argue whether the salaries are low or not.
In other words, this is subjective.
Yes.
But looking at their capacity or lack of it to retain staff, does it have an impact in the fight against corruption in the country?
It definitely has, looking at institutional memory. So to a certain extent, they might have been affected. They've talked about low funding as well. Their funding was also cut. So all those are issues. Maybe there was a deliberate effort in the past to frustrate the ACB. But I believe that with the strong will, and the person at the helm now is very strong-willed, she has managed to surmount such challenges before elsewhere. We're bound to see something different this time around.
Talking of funding to ACB, it was initially in the 2021-2022 national budget. It was initially cut by 14% as proposed by the finance minister, a move that analysts feared could compromise the graft fighting in the country.
That's exactly my point now, that the person who is at the helm now, she managed to work as ombudsman in an office which was also apparently underfunded. There are always ways. You look at priorities now. You decide which cases to expedite. I don't think they've talked about this as much now, apart from this person who was actually now in Parliament. But they've been moving. We have seen them moving. The arrests have started. The prosecutions have also started. So let's wait and see.
In other words, underfunding shouldn't be a concern?
It should not be an excuse.
But a concern?
Yeah. You look at priorities.
What, in your own view as it stands now, what should be the priorities of the Anti-Corruption Bureau?
I think the priorities should be getting rid of the backlog. The cases we all know about, which have been dragging on for over 10, 15 years, those ones should be expedited.
You're taking me a little backwards. Why as a country do we still bask in the comfort of a backlog of cases that are graft related?
I think it also depends on who is who at that particular point. Because definitely we all know that the whole country has an interest in this particular case, and then you let it drag along. There have also been cases of interference from maybe other quarters, though that has been denied. We don't know about that, but we can all see that something is wrong with this case. Maybe somebody has told them, slow down. So as human beings, maybe they also fear for their jobs. All those are factors that have to be taken into consideration.
Are we anywhere near winning the war against corruption?
No, we're not.
How far?
Very far.
Strides made?
A little bit, unfortunately, only for the small fish.
Why? Because this, Mao, has been a concern, not only from you and I, members of the media, but even if you speak to the people on the ground, this has been a concern. Why?
But that is a problem the world over. It is not just in Malawi. We have those who are more equal than others. It happens everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So long as you can afford the best lawyers, you can drag your case even for 100 years if you want. So it's a question of having money. You be taken to court and then you fall sick. You'll be in a private hospital for 6 months. It happens. It has happened.
Mm-hmm.
You fall sick until your case maybe is temporarily stymied, and then you become very well again. So it's that cycle that goes on. So long as you are rich, you are clever, you can get away with almost anything, unfortunately.
Should we fold our arms to believe that this is a hill we can't flatten?
It is so near impossible. But by nature, most human beings, they are corrupt. So you cannot say that we can be living in a kind of utopia where everything is just perfect. That cannot happen. So long as we are human, we are all fallible. We have our own problems.
There is a new broom, I would use that word, at the Anti-Corruption Bureau in the name of the new director, Martha Chizuma. Much as the issue is about funding, but we can't go without talking about her. Her coming in months down the line, how do you rate?
That's why I'm saying that things are now moving. We have seen things moving. We've even had the whole head of state actually asked some questions. So it gives a glimmer of hope that maybe she might not actually get rid of all the corruption and whatever. That is impossible. Mm-hmm. But definitely a bit of fear will come in because she doesn't fear who to arrest, who to question. So that is a very good sign.
I've always argued on the essence or the need to build strong, resilient, and robust systems in institutions like this, beyond individuals. I would still pose it to you, Mbao. How essential is it that the Anti-Corruption Bureau do have a robust, strong, and resilient system?
It is very important for all of us, actually. You and I, in any small way, at some point, we're always affected by the corruption. You go to hospitals, you find there's nothing. There's no oxygen. There's nothing like that, especially in this time of a pandemic. So those are very necessary. We need such systems. But also, and I always say this, we need to be patriotic. Because the pandemic has actually leveled the playing field. So those who would have rushed to hospital outside, they're now forced to go to Queens, they're forced to go to KCH. Mm-hmm. And when they're seeing how dire the situation is, and there's no hope of the world opening up again soon, because the other hospitals elsewhere are also overwhelmed. So maybe this time around, people will gain a conscience and say, this man, this woman should not have died in this hospital in such a condition. It happened because they were careless and they were corrupt.
Mm-hmm. Back to the funding issue, you said, if I'm to rephrase what you said, and you correct me if I err, you said that funding alone shouldn't be an excuse.
No, it shouldn't.
But could there be a day when the country, the Chancellor of the Exchequer of the country, would be in a position to say, SEB, here is all you needed?
Unfortunately, there are always vested interests. Because the corruption issues, they do not just affect those who are in opposition at that particular point. You find that those at the helm also, they are very much involved in corruption sometimes. So everyone also has that fear that maybe one day if I give this person too much power, it might come and bite me in the end. Mm-hmm. So you just dilly-dally until another year goes by.
You say we are still miles away or a long way towards ending corruption in the country. Terming this cancer called corruption. What do we need to do if we are to lessen the distance?
It's about soul searching. So it begins with you as an individual. You decide that I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to pay this bribe. I am going to be a whistleblower. I'm going to write about this and expose this. Small steps, one step at a time.
In other words, you're trying to say that dealing with corruption, to a great extent, is about dealing with it before it even happens.
Mm-hmm.
But do we have that moral compass?
You should also actually talk about it. When you see it, you should talk about it. Expose it.
Do we have that moral compass as it stands as a country?
Now that it depends on you as an individual, whether you decide to be or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it comes with a risk, of course. So mm-hmm. you weigh the options now and decide, do I really want to endanger my life, my family, my job because of this issue? And then maybe you just sweep it under the carpet and the rot continues.
We've noted lately top government officials being questioned by the Anti-Corruption Bureau. As if that is not enough, we've noted the presidency taking a step just based on that move. What does it portray?
We are taking small baby steps in the right
Baby
direction.
step in the right direction.
It's a very huge mountain, as I said. We cannot level it, but definitely we can chip away a bit of the stone from there, and something good might come out.
I would repeat this question deliberately, Mbawo. Could there be a day, one day, we are talking of Malawi 2063, could there be maybe in 2063 that we can say, thank Lord God Almighty, we are done with corruption?
I don't know, maybe that would be in heaven. That is pure utopia. It cannot happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Involvement of politicians in the fight against corruption. Do you see the political will?
Not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
What could have been done?
In terms of what now?
Of ensuring that there is political will at its entirety.
That also begins at individual level.
Mm-hmm.
There's a presidency there, but it's also surrounded by a lot of people with their own interests. They might be on his side, but then they also have their own vested interests elsewhere. Even if it is not for them, maybe it's somebody close to them. So it's like a vicious cycle where you just keep on turning, but you really cannot achieve that particular goal that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many split minds there. If it was one person, like maybe it was a dictatorship, and you say, whatever I say holds, maybe it would work, but this is a collective thing. No one person can do it on his own.
Let's examine magnitude and impact. In your assessment, how huge is the problem in this country?
It is a very big problem. It begins, even you go to primary school, you find that the teachers would want to be bribed. You go to traffic, there's a problem. You want to file a police report, there's a problem. You want to go to hospital, there's a problem. So I'll give you an example of the hospitals where somebody was disciplined because they were demanding 400,000 kwacha for a procedure which was free. They've been suspended. So those are the steps that we're talking about. Individual cases, when people see that the medical council is serious, maybe it will push you back if you were trying to do the same thing. If corruption was the norm at that particular hospital, the others will take a step back and say, wow, our friend was suspended for 5 years, maybe we should not do this. So things like that would deter others in future. Small steps, but things are happening.
Talking of which, when we all thought corruption is about those that are closer to the power, those that are closer to the press, we've noted, we've been confided to information, for instance, that even guards at public hospitals would want to make ends meet the unfortunate way, just that they should get some preferential treatment. I mean, people should get It's a moral issue, isn't it?
It is, but it's so entrenched in how we live. You know that if I have to go into that hospital and I'm late, maybe I will not be allowed to see my patient, I have to give the guard maybe something, just like a handshake, and you know what you're doing there. So
with this COVID.
It's a culture.
Mm-hmm.
They know how they do it. So it's that kind of culture that is so entrenched, and if we are to stop it, maybe it has to start with our children right in secondary or even primary school, to realize the dangers of having such a corrupt society.
With a lot of public funds going down the drain through corruption, we may not specify how much. Malawi is vying in the ranks of war-torn countries in as far as poverty is concerned, if I'm to be a little brutal with the truth. Where are we missing it as a country?
I think maybe it's the kind of leadership that we have invested in, because the ordinary person in the street cannot do much about it. They're just on the receiving end of whatever happens. They're just told, you get AIP, you not get AIP, things like that. So the small man will always not have a say, unless maybe on the day of the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
But then it also depends on the kind of people you're now electing. Do they have the goodwill at heart? Do they love this country? Are they patriotic enough? Or they are there for themselves? Mm-hmm. And unless we actually choose one day, or the ones at the top actually decide to love this country the way they say they do, things would be different.
Let's have a break a bit, but before we go, if we were to be given a daunting task to offer counsel or advice to the powers that may be, what advice would you give, Paulo?
It's a question of putting Malawi first, because that is what they said when we voted them into power. Mm-hmm. That is what they promised us. So they should start walking the talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the question of putting Malawians first. That's according to one Mbao. This is the Cauldron where editors meet. We'll be right back, continuing with how the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament has been facing some public institutions in as far as their performance is concerned. That's when we get back inside the Cauldron. Welcome back. My name is William Kumwembe, and this is the Cauldron where editors meet. And with me here is Mbao Javula. Mbao is news editor at the Blantyre Synod Radio. Mbao, prior to going to the break, we were talking about the performance of the Anti-Corruption Bureau vis-a-vis lamentation of low funding. Moving on, all it stemmed from the Public Accounts Committee, which has been meeting some public institutions to discuss how they are faring and what needs to be done. Now, from the SCB, let's go to the Central Bank. With PAC, which took up some task on Wednesday over failure to license its subsidiary of the Reserve Bank of Malawi, the Export Development Fund, for close to 9 years. 9 years is not a joke. Will wonders ever end in this country?
That is why we commended the committee at the beginning that they're doing their work. Mm-hmm. Because if they hadn't actually summoned those people, that confection would not have been made.
Would have not known this.
And life would have been going on. So how many illegal decisions have been taken in the past 9 years? And this is stemming like over 2 or 3 governments, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. We've just been living one day at a time. Instead of actually enforcing governance laws, the government is actually the first to break those laws. Mm-hmm. So now that the committee has come in and made it very clear that things have to change, mm-hmm. we've been promised as a nation that things are changing. But why now? Because even those people who actually went to the committee, they've been in the Reserve Bank for a long time. Mm-hmm. They've been part of that system. Mm-hmm. Why was that allowed to happen?
The tough question, an extension to yours, because I would push it back to you. Why has that been allowed to happen? I think or the central bank is better positioned to respond to that.
They're best placed to answer why they've been operating illegally mm-hmm. in certain aspects when they're supposed to be the watchdog.
Good that you are taking it to that extreme where you're saying illegally. The next tough question could be, would the central bank allow anyone within the financial services sector to operate the way EDF was operating?
If that was happening, what else do we not know about? Maybe it's time now to start digging and look at all the banks that are operating, or the other financial institutions, and see how they're operating. Maybe now is the time.
Isn't it a key indication that there is double standards?
That's exactly the point. If they can do that, and the other ones are watching, they know that, and it's not like the others didn't know, but it was just something that was just let to sleep. Mm-hmm. So if you see somebody breaking the law, you see a parent breaking the law, next time you also break the law, do they have the moral standing to ask you any questions? Since that's the way we live.
Having EDF in itself is a good thing, let's be frank. I'm speaking this from the background of industry and trade. It's a good thing. But really, should the means justify the ends?
They shouldn't. We have a government, we have laws. They should be followed. Simple.
What needs to be done now that we have noted that there is
They
this
say that
error?
they are rectifying it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that committee should have given them a timeline to say by such and such a date you should have come and with all the documents to show that everything is now in the clear. As a nation, we should also be interested in following that up.
Is it an issue that we can just let go in the name of they are following up, or they are finding a remedy? Or should we as a country learn from such experiences to bring someone to be responsible for such?
Yeah, there should be a deadline. The issue is now out in the open. As a Malawian, I'm now interested in knowing that it has come to its final conclusion, mm-hmm. where everything is now above board.
I would be tempted to talk about situations where the country has lost huge sums of money because of one recklessness of some office bearer at a given period of time. should we just say it's fine, it's okay?
This is not just about one person. This is a whole office. Everyone knows what is happening,
entire institution.
right up to the governor of the bank. So we cannot say that it should be one person being held responsible. Maybe we can borrow a leaf from what the court said, where in some cases government has lost a lot of money and somebody says you should be personally liable. Maybe if that really happens, and we have seen several cases now happening. We had another case today where the former president lost an appeal, him with the former secretary to the cabinet, where they were told to pay personal costs for trying to send the Chief Justice on leave. So if maybe more cases like that were happening, where people actually held personally liable, things would change in this country.
What lessons should be drawn from all this in as far as systems and structures? I'm deliberately getting back to systems and structures in public entities and institutions. Or should we continue with the mindset of Ndizaboma?
No, we need to have vigilant people like the ones we have in this particular committee, where Parliament should also really play its role like it is doing, to keep them on their toes, and they should know that somebody is watching. You're breaking the law deliberately, something will happen to you. This
could be a tip in the iceberg in as far as the operations of government entities and institutions is concerned. Your view of public institutions?
They should be out in the open like this, totally openly scrutinized. And all of us are watching. Unfortunately, we just be discussing it like this. Or maybe you'll be discussing it over a drink. Oh, they were doing this. And then life goes on. There is no follow-up, even with us as journalists now. So maybe if we woke up and started actually following up on these issues, things would be different.
Things would be different. Your assessment of the civil service, we have crossed the bridge deliberately. One of the key entities of the government is the civil service. And without a robust, resilient civil service, honestly, it's hard for a country to move, for a government to move. Your assessment of the civil service performance?
We're still waiting for the reforms to be implemented before we can talk about the civil service.
I didn't know that we'd get to the reforms. Now that you've brought the reforms, what do you make of the reforms?
They're there, but they're not there. So I really cannot talk about them.
You cannot talk about something that is there and is not there. Yeah. The past 30 years, we've had change of governments. We've had change of top-notch people in the civil service. Your assessment, how we have delivered as a country in as far as civil service is concerned, prior to the narrative of reforms?
The civil service is actually what runs this country, because we've changed the governments, as you said, and the system hasn't totally collapsed, meaning that there is some kind of structure. But maybe it is not running up to the optimum that it should. But it's there. It's served us since independence up to now. Yeah.
Should we hope for the best out of it?
When we see the reforms.
Or what we have is the best already?
When it is reformed, we'll see. That's when we can give an assessment.
What would it take to reform the civil service?
You're putting me into a corner, because
I'm not apologetic for.
There was a whole setup where the VP and his crew they set up the reforms. The reforms are now in the office of the president. At his pleasure, when he decides now to implement them or to accept that they be implemented, then maybe we'll see a difference in the way the civil service operates. But I'll still maintain that the civil service is there. It has always been there since 1964. Even during the colonial times, it was there. It is now in a different form, but it is there. And the government, the semblance of order is there. So maybe if the reforms were implemented, something would be different. But at the moment, we're still moving. We're limping along, but we're moving.
But in the interim, we are limping, but we are moving.
Yes.
In the interim, we are limping, but we are moving. Let's limp out a little and have some break. We'll be right back. This is the Cauldron, where editors meet. Welcome back. This is the Cauldron, where editors meet, and my name is William Kumwembe. Moving on with the program, we are going international, and the news is none other than Taliban takeover. Let me reintroduce to you Mbao Chavula. Mbao is news editor at the Blantyre Synod Radio. Mbao, we are going to talk about Taliban. In the equation, there will be the United States. So I would love if you fasten your seatbelts. Indian envoy to Qatar met the head of Taliban's political office in Doha in a first formal diplomatic contact. The Minister of External Affairs said this week, Tuesday, the meeting between Indian ambassador and the head of the Taliban political office in Doha took place at the Indian embassy at the request of the Taliban side, according to the ministry. Let us get to the context of the issue first. What do you make of what has happened, what is happening, and what would happen in Afghanistan?
Afghanistan is now fully back under Taliban control. The US has lost the war. It has packed and left. Yeah, to put it bluntly, that's that's what has happened.
I expected that.
And the Taliban is there now. They're fully back in control. The president ran away. The Taliban is, the government is now called the Emirate of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And the very fact that the Indian ambassador has agreed to actually meet with a member of the Emirate shows that to some extent they're also recognizing that these people are there to stay. Waging a war against the United States, 20 years, they were still resilient. They have not been annihilated. They're there, stronger than ever. So it's a necessary evil that they have to talk to them. And this is a reformed Taliban. That they're not as extreme. Anyway, this is just the beginning. They're not as extreme as the other one. That was for Mullah Omar, I believe, and Osama bin Laden. So their governments are also very cautious, just watching to see what next steps. For now, I know that previously the women were not allowed out, but now they're allowed to go back to school, albeit separately from the boys. The girls are in university, separate classes, but at least they're being allowed to go to school. So we'll see how they compromise to make themselves a bit more palatable to the world as well as their neighbors.
The Taliban, as you're putting it, seized power in Afghanistan 2 weeks before the US was set to complete its troop withdrawal after a costly 2-decade, as you're putting it, 2-decade war. Did the US and the world see this coming?
I do not think that the United States would have been blindsided. I do not believe so. Because even when they left Bagram, they left you, even the government soldiers did not know that the US soldiers had left. The ones who are now mopping up, the ones who are now trying to evacuate people, they actually had to come in from elsewhere, I think from the UAE. So really, they knew that they had lost. Or maybe whatever they were looking for, it was no longer viable in that particular place. They decided to leave, leaving the people there high and dry. You have seen the crisis, the chaos that is there. That is now a consequence of that particular war. These people are now collateral damage. Yeah.
As you're putting it, the insurgents stormed across the country, capturing all major cities in the matter of days as Afghan security forces, trained and equipped by the US, by the way, and its allies melted away. Hard to comprehend?
It isn't, because you cannot just come into a country and try to force your culture on that particular people. The Afghans, they're Afghans. So even if you try to impose American culture on them, at heart, they're still Afghans. And most of the soldiers, actually, they defected to go to the Taliban. They were the ones giving information to the Taliban. Of course, there's one small group of resistance army. I understand they're training to fight against the Taliban. But with the US gone, the UK gone, I do not see that succeeding. It will just be a small guerrilla war where they'll just do something here and then melt back into the forest with not much impact.
Should we rate the withdrawal of the US from Afghanistan a tactical move or a position of, say...
It is not. They're no longer interested. Even the CNN has considered that the US has lost the war. Newsweek has actually written they lost the war there, or they whatever it was they were looking for, they are no longer interested in it. They have gone. They've even left some of their citizens within that country. What about them?
Not much is being said by world leaders on what has happened in Afghanistan, except maybe off record. Why the silence?
It is because this is Big Brother. Big Brother has lost.
Wait a minute.
You do not criticize your big brother. And actually, it's a slap in the face to the whole NATO action, because NATO was there. NATO has left. Germany evacuated its people, UK evacuated its people, US evacuated its people. Excuse me, the Afghans are now left high and dry. The ones who were working with NATO, they are now being hunted.
We've seen some footage of people trying to move out of the country, finding some asylum. Should we say all is lost in the country?
It is not lost, it is their country. They just have to reach some sort of compromise. We all do that. We have a new government. We abide by the rule of that new government. So now it is back to the Taliban government, albeit a bit more flexible than it used to be. We do not know what will happen when they actually now consolidate their power. They are trying, as you're saying, they're now talking to the neighbors. They're talking to India. Next it will be Pakistan. So to a certain extent, they will be accepted as a necessary evil. But they're there to stay, and the people just have to accept that and believe that's their country. You cannot evacuate the whole country. Where are they going to go?
What do you make of outcore meddling in external affairs by countries that are deemed superpowers?
Remember, they first bombed Afghanistan because they were looking for Osama bin Laden. That was ultimately the goal at that time. Osama was not killed in Afghanistan, he was killed in Pakistan. So you see that maybe when they evaluated it and then they realized, what really are we doing in this country? They were propping up the government, but for what? Because their main goal was to get Osama bin Laden. He was gotten rid of, Mullah Omar was gotten rid of, but the Taliban is still the same. It just melted away, but it has been fighting vigilantly. And within 10 days, they managed to storm even the presidential palace, meaning that they were working even with the soldiers of the government that were being propped up by the US and NATO.
Fight for superiority by some countries across the globe. We've noted some key countries. Last year it was an issue to do between China and the United States. What do you make of all these global politics?
I should say that China has already moved into Afghanistan at this point. I understand Afghanistan has got some mineral, I think lithium or something like that. China has already set its tentacles there. So it's just a question of now the other one acknowledging they have lost, or maybe they don't care, they have left, then they've left it to anyone else. And even Russia has been very quiet. It hasn't said much because Russia also lost the war in Afghanistan. So they knew maybe that what the Americans and NATO were doing was a lost cause. Yeah.
Last but not least, what does the future hold for Afghanistan?
They will stabilize. The problem is we look at everything according to a Western standard. We say they've regressed, they've gone back 100 years, what have you. But that is their country, that is their culture. You cannot say people are civilized because you've imposed your culture on them.
Let's have a break. When we get back, we'll talk about media and freedom, or media freedom.
Okay.
This is the Cauldron, where editors meet. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and this is the last mile of the program, The Cauldron, where editors meet. My name is William Mwembe, and here with me is one Mbawo Javula. Mbawo is news editor at the Blantyre Synod Radio. In the very last segment of the program, we discuss issues that have a bearing in as far as how we execute our duties as journalists in the country and internationally. And today, one exciting thing, Mbawo, is to do with media and freedom, or freedom of the press. We tout freedom of expression is the birthright of all. That's what we say. It's a constitutional right that we have, and we make the most of it. These two tenets are inseparable, aren't they?
Yeah.
Media and freedom.
Definitely. But maybe what we forget is that there's also responsibility where there are rights.
I was about to ask, at what point do we say the freedom of the media has been infringed upon?
When somebody actually takes you to jail, maybe for writing something, for bringing to the fore something that they tried to hide, for maybe, what do they say, inciting violence, trying, even treason. We've had journalists imprisoned for treason because they've dared to write something that the government didn't like. So maybe they crossed a certain line which they were not supposed to cross, according to some others. Yeah.
We have the platform they do not have. Should we say we make the most of our platform?
I should say that that area is no longer sacrosanct now to us with the advent of social media. Everyone is now free to express themselves, to write what they may call news. Though
What they may call.
yeah, they are self-taught, they are citizen journalists. So that fine line now is even more blurred, looking at the fact that everyone with a smartphone can decide to disseminate news in any way they like, however irresponsible it might be at that point.
But don't we, in some instances, infringe upon other people's freedom and rights in the name of free press?
Yeah, then they also have the right to seek redress in the courts. Or even on those same platforms, especially like on social media, the power to answer back is right there. It's immediate. It's powerful. Somebody writes, William is so and so, immediately you respond right there. So everyone now has a platform to speak their mind.
Who regulates the media, by the way, in the best interest of people out there?
We should have MACRA, we should have the Minister of Information, government to a certain extent. Your media house should also regulate what you do. We have the media bodies like MISA, we have Media Council, all those are supposed to. And even you yourself as an individual, you're supposed to regulate yourself.
The latter is an interesting part, self-regulatory. Are we as honest in trying to regulate ourselves?
To a certain extent, yes. I'm not going to go against my own profession.
That's why I wanted. That's one thing that makes me be excited with this segment, where we do some self-examination. So you'd wish not to speak more about yourself?
No, there are always some bad apples. That is inevitable. So there are some good journalists, there are some bad journalists, there are those who are lukewarm. So
how are they, or how should they be treated?
You know, journalism is a calling. It's a very noble profession. But as I said, the bad apples would want now to maybe to use it as a platform for blackmail. You just want to destroy some other people. We have the power to do that, actually. You can just write a story. It might be true, but in the end, you might destroy somebody totally. And when you destroy one person, you are destroying maybe 10, 15 others people who rely on that particular person. So it's really a question of now self-regulation to say, is this worth it? Why am I doing this?
Lastly, but not least, of course, talk of motive. Is there any driving force called motive in as far as writing news stories is concerned?
It's always there. Everyone has an agenda. Your media house has an agenda. Mine has an agenda. We do things with some kind of motive, always. Whether it will to influence people to our side for the good or the bad, but we always have a motive.
Let's end it there before we spill the beans. But thank you so much, Mbao, for coming in to this program. We always appreciate your presence in the Cauldron. Of late, I've noted we haven't talked much about the United States except for pulling out of the Afghanistan, which is a thing that you should have said, I predicted, I saw it coming. But thank you so much, Mbao, once again.
Thank you.
And on that note, we've also come to the end of today's edition of the program, The Cauldron, where editors meet. On behalf of the entire production team, my name is William Kumwembe. Bye for now.